What are the aims of the Climate Vulnerable Forum?
You'll recall that this was established in this was got together in 2009 at the initiative of the Maldives president. The underlying issue is this: that we have all these small island developing states, all these smaller states, the low-lying coastal states, which are by themselves not as visible, not as pronounced, but in terms of the vulnerability, they account for the most serious levels. Almost for many it's existential, for many it is nearly existential. And the idea was, how do you give them greater voice in the ongoing climate change discourse? How do you make an impact on these perspectives in the negotiation process? Because what is happening is, we have, of course, this broad debate going on: adaptation, mitigation, the historical big bad boys, the new big bad boys, all of that. But what is happening is, climate change is here and now. And for those that are most vulnerable, the debate cannot wait for people to reconcile the differences, because, had we but well enough in time, your coyness would not be a problem. So we need to get started. And the best way to do this is to create a solidarity of the most vulnerable countries, and then speak out in one voice, so that there's a visibility, there's a greater discourse within our own communities. Therefore, we are addressing the global discourse, and we're addressing also our home territory, so that there is a continuity and a collectiveness in the issues we bring to fore. Now, when we talk about what perspectives are we talking about, it is this: that when you have climate change challenges that are of an existential nature, for instance, global warming resulting in sea level rise poses the threat of many of the small island states going under. And we have even a political issue, a philosophical problem as to where does sovereignty then lie for these states. For low-lying coastal states like Bangladesh, we lose about 1/3 of our territory, which means 25 million people being displaced. And when they're displaced, where do they go? They go into contiguous, densely populated zones, which means a conflict of interest in terms of habitation, livelihood, and the rest. And then there is, beyond the humanitarian dimension, this serious issue of transboundary movement of these people, and therefore nexuses with gun running, smuggling, trafficking, and you name it. So serious security issues. And we talk about these 25 million people not in terms of one go, because their disempowerment would run over generations, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations. Now, this severity is not reflected when you talk about how many cuts, what percentage, and all of that. We want to bring the severity to the public eye. And we expect that this would have a telling impact on how people then address solutions. But we also want to do something else. We just do not want to say, all right, you big bad boys, you're the historical culprits. I think that has been established. By '92, we know that people have people know who are responsible, and they've acknowledged it. We now need to get to solutions. We want to be part of the solution. Therefore, although we are not the major emitters, we want to be those who lead by example. For instance, in Bangladesh, we have created our own national adaptation fund, $300 million to start with. Not too big, but from our own resources. And we said, while the world takes its time, we want to start on our own. Maldives has declared a zero carbon perspective. Now, when you look at this, the countries which are severely most severely vulnerable, but they themselves taking on responsibilities, then what happens is it translates as example on those who should be doing more. And therefore this duality of bringing our perspective to the discourse and also leading with our example is what we intend to do. Do we expect a solution in Durban? Perhaps not. In fact, not. But building this in a manner so that it influences whatever discussions go on in Durban and bring it to the larger sustainable development question at Rio+20, and also to see that a platform of this sort sustains, because that sustaining it would mean that the long journey towards a legally binding commitments would need this consistency, this sustainable voice of the most vulnerable. And if we want to talk about that, we see that there are problems with the accessing of funds. There are problems with how people look at the fast track fund, the green fund. And we realize that if you look at the 5 planks, adaptation, mitigation, funding, technology transfer, and capacity building, it is equally important to emphasize access to green technology. And that brings in the question of the IP regimes and to what extent we're prepared to be flexible on that, so that green technology can qualitatively change the life and livelihood of people in the most vulnerable countries. With that goes capacity building. Now, let us look at this adaptation mitigation issue. Many would draw a red line between the two, but in effect, they're not too far apart. We now have, for instance, salinity intrusion into Bangladesh, and which is affecting our rice production. But how do you adapt to this? We have developed salinity-resistant varieties of rice. And so that is an adaptation measure. But the moment you look at such investment in technology that goes on to develop such special varieties is, in effect, measures of mitigation. So mitigation and adaptation are not really too far apart. And that is the message we want to bring, that we need to act now for those where the climate change challenges are here and now. And for those who think it's here but not necessarily now, we simply would like to say that if you're traveling in an aeroplane and fire breaks out in economy class and you're sitting pretty in business class, you should not feel complacent that it's not going to affect you, because it's going to get us all down. The whole issue, of course, in this negotiation, and despite the fact that we are bringing together all of us, is that before Rio, we had the Brundtland Commission. And there was a very interesting line, which I quoted today. The earth is one, but the world is not, which means all these issues have an element of politics in this. And we therefore need to employ the tools of politics that get us to solutions. And the CVF Forum is one of those tools to get together these vulnerable people, to have a bigger voice, to be able to do some global activism, to be able to showcase our own moral leadership and get it to impact the ongoing discourse.
We've heard former President Figueres say that we are insulted by the lack of action from rich countries. Do you think there's a sense that some of the poorer, more vulnerable countries are giving up with the rich countries and just deciding to get on with the job themselves?
I think. Well, there are perspectives. I mean, there are ways in which this can be looked at. I do not think that there is any alternative to global solutions. There is only this much that you can do with your own resources. But we need to start this. And what it does is it sends that message that, look, here are those who have to divert their funds from their development projects to adapt. And here we are quibbling over whose responsibility it is and who should act first. And therefore we feel that the potential for greater and collective global action is expedited if we lead by example. But that's not the end of it. This is a journey that we've embarked on. This is not a destination. CVF 2000 is a journey. CVF is not a destination. And that is the message we gave yesterday in the inaugural of the preparatory meeting. And I'm sure you'll see CVF at Durban and in other public places where climate change is talked about. Rio 20 should be another place where we want to be seen and heard big.
Thank you very much for speaking to